Okay, hello and welcome to today's Cyber Resilience 202 webinar. My name is David Meese. I'm the Director of Security and Risk Services here at Resilience, and I'll be the moderator of today's session. For our 202 sessions, we bring in experts from the Resilience team to discuss relevant topics in cyber risk. In this short, impactful session today, get ready to enhance your understanding of cyber risk and to learn about some of the important measures to protect your clients or organization and stay ahead of cyber criminals. For those of you who are new to Resilience, we connect our risk quantification software that uses the same models and data that we use to underwrite cyber insurance policies with cybersecurity experts and A+ insurance to help our clients better avoid, and when avoidance is not possible, recover from cyber attacks with the least amount of impact. Nobody else does this. We help you make better decisions, better business decisions about where to focus your efforts and investments with an eye on reducing your losses as cost effectively as possible. In today's world, being able to take a hit and keep going is more important than not getting hit at all. Today's webinar title is Phishing 2.0, Battling Email Threats and Evilginx. It will be led by the very talented Sivan Sarkosian, one of our senior technical security advisors here at Resilience. One last thing before I hand it over to Sivan. If you have any questions, please drop them into the chat or via the Q&A feature. We've reserved some time at the end to review them. So Sivan, passing things over to you now.
Thank you, David. Hi, everyone. My name is Sivan Sarkosian. Thank you for joining us today. I'm a senior technical security advisor here at Resilience. I've been with the company for about 10 months now. I come from an 8-year background in security and systems engineering with a bachelor's degree in finance and several cybersecurity certifications. With that said, let's jump straight into our agenda for today. So today we will be covering email security holistically and some general mitigation efforts that help prevent some of the common social engineering attacks, as well as business email compromise. We will then take a look at Evilginx, which is a popular tool used by attackers to bypass multi-factor authentication. We will actually do a short technical demonstration of how that attack takes place, followed by some of the specific controls that can mitigate against it. At the end, we will also have some time for a Q&A. Perfect. So what is email security? In short, email security is the practice of protecting email accounts and communication systems from unauthorized access, loss, or compromise. It's vital because email remains as one of the most common attack vectors used by cyber criminals, and this is primarily due to the mass usage of email systems as a primary form of external communication across enterprises. According to Valley Mail, there are 3 billion phishing emails sent daily, and Verizon estimated that 36% of data breaches start from phishing emails. Agari also reported that the average cost of a successful business email compromise was $70,000. So first, I want to go over some of the key threats that organizations need to protect against as it relates to their email systems. First up, we have phishing, which is the most common email attack type, and it's something that nearly every organization has to deal with at some point. Phishing is when attackers try to trick you into revealing sensitive information like usernames, passwords, or bank account details. The goal is to get you to click on a link or open an attachment that gives them access to your sensitive information. Phishing attacks have become increasingly sophisticated over time, with fake emails looking almost identical to legitimate ones. There are also different variations of phishing. Spear phishing, as an example, is a targeted form of phishing where attackers customize their messages to a specific individual or organization instead of a generic mass campaign. We also have whaling, which is a type of spear phishing that specifically targets high-profile individuals, such as executives or key decision makers, and usually involves urgent and high-stakes scenarios to trick the victim. Quishing has become more common as well, and this is when cybercriminals use QR codes to direct victims to fraudulent websites. And unlike traditional phishing, quishing can be harder to detect as users may trust QR codes without realizing the potential risks. Next, we have email spoofing, and spoofing occurs when an attacker forges the from address of an email, making it appear like the email is coming from a trusted source. The attacker might use a familiar name like your boss or a colleague in order to gain your trust and trick you into taking action on the email. The danger with spoofing is that it can often bypass traditional security filters since the email looks so authentic. We also have business email compromise, or BEC for short. BEC is a more targeted and sophisticated attack. In this case, a hacker will compromise a legitimate business email account. Once they have access, they use that account to deceive employees into transferring money, sharing sensitive data, or making fraudulent payments. The impact of BEC is huge. In fact, just in 2022 alone, BEC scams resulted in a loss of over $2.7 billion globally for businesses. These attacks are often very well researched and can be hard to detect, which is why employees at every level need to be aware of these threats and have procedures in place to verify requests before taking action. Lastly, we have malware, and malware is malicious software that can be delivered via email attachments or links. Once a recipient clicks on the link or opens an attachment, the malware is installed. From there, the attacker can gain access to the machine, steal data, or even encrypt files. Malware attacks often come in the form of seemingly innocent files or links, so it is essential to be vigilant and never open attachments or click on links in emails unless you're absolutely sure of the source. So now that we have an understanding of common email threats, let's discuss some of the key controls that help mitigate these vulnerabilities and reduce risks. One of the most effective methods in stopping the delivery of malicious emails are secure email gateways, or SEGs. An SEG is a powerful tool that sits between your email system and the outside world, acting as a filter to block malicious emails before they reach your inbox. SEGs detect and block various threats, including phishing emails, spam, and malware. They use a combination of real-time threat intelligence, spam filtering, and signature-based detection to ensure that only legitimate emails pass through. Within secure email gateways, one of the most important functions is content analysis. This process scans the actual content of incoming emails, looking for suspicious attachments, malicious scripts, or links that could lead to phishing or malware. It is a key defense mechanism to spot hidden threats, even if they don't look immediately suspicious. Another key tool is URL scanning, and in this process, the URLs within an email are examined to determine whether they point to malicious websites or phishing sites. Attackers often use legitimate-looking emails to direct recipients to fraudulent sites to steal personal information. URL scanning verifies the safety of links in real time, blocking dangerous ones before they can be clicked on. Sandboxing is another advanced technique. When an email has an attachment, sandboxing opens the file in a secure, isolated environment to monitor its behavior. If the attachment is harmful, like malware or ransomware, it's detected and blocked without risk to your main system. Sandboxing helps catch new threats that may not yet have signatures in existing malware databases. While secure email gateways are essential for protecting against email-based threats, they sometimes flag legitimate messages as suspicious, placing them in quarantine. This is where quarantine digests come into play by offering users the chance to review these flagged emails. Users will have the ability to release or delete emails directly from the digest, which helps strike a balance between maintaining a robust email security and ensuring important communications are not missed. Next, we have multi-factor authentication, which of course is an essential tool for protecting your email accounts. MFA adds an extra layer of security beyond just a password. It requires 2 or more forms of authentication. This is generally something that you know, like a password, or something that you have, like a mobile phone number or a hardware token. This significantly reduces the risk of unauthorized access, even if your password is compromised. With that said, it is important to note that not all MFA is created equal. While SMS-based MFA is common, it is more vulnerable to attacks like SIM swapping. And this is where attackers take control of your phone number and are able to redirect messages. App-based or hardware token MFA is far more secure, and it is less susceptible to interception and fraud. And just like everything else in security, MFA is not a foolproof solution. Attackers can still bypass MFA with modern phishing tools like Evilginx, which we will look into shortly. One of the best ways to combat spoofing attempts on your organization's domain is by implementing email authentication protocols. These include SPF, DKIM, and DMARC. SPF stands for Sender Policy Framework, and it is a DNS entry that checks if an email is coming from a server authorized by the domain that it is claiming to be from. As an example, if an email claims to be from your bank, SPF checks if the email originated from an IP address listed in your bank's SPF record. Next, we have DKIM, which stands for Domain Keys Identified Mail. This protocol uses encryption to add a digital signature to emails. When the email is received, DKIM verifies that the email content has not been tampered with. If someone alters the content in transit, DKIM can detect the change, preventing fraud and ensuring the integrity of the email. Finally, we have DMARC. This one is a mouthful. It stands for Domain-Based Message Authentication, Reporting, and Conformance. It ties together SPF and DKIM. DMARC uses the results of SPF and DKIM checks to decide whether an email should be delivered, quarantined, or rejected based on the configured policy at the DNS level. It also provides some reporting features so domain owners can monitor how their domain is being used in email communications and spot attempts at impersonation. As it relates to business email compromise, dual authorization and verification also play a crucial role, especially for wire transfer related transactions. As I previously mentioned, business email compromise attacks often involve attackers impersonating executives or trusted parties to make fraudulent payments. Implementing dual authorization will typically require two individuals to authorize an action, ensuring that no single person has complete control over a critical process. Verification methods, such as confirming transfer details through a separate communication channel, can help ensure that wire transfers are legitimate and protect against these sophisticated attacks. Finally, no matter how sophisticated your security tools are, human error remains as a significant vulnerability. That's why user training is a critical part of email security. Educating employees on how to recognize phishing emails, handle suspicious attachments, and follow best security practices is essential to reducing the risk of a successful attack. Targeted training is especially effective. Instead of a generic security awareness program, tailored training to address the specific needs of different departments or roles. As an example, executives might need training on spear phishing, while IT staff should focus on technical vulnerabilities. To make training more effective, build it into your HR process. Include security awareness as part of your new employee onboarding, and offer regular refresher courses to keep everyone updated on the latest threats. Also, make sure that employees know how to report suspicious emails or incidents. That's an important one. One of the best ways to test user readiness is to run phishing simulations. These are controlled exercises that send fake phishing emails to employees to see how many fall for the bait. The results can identify areas where further training is needed and help improve overall security awareness. Awesome. So now let's talk about Evilginx. Evilginx is a man-in-the-middle phishing tool that enables attackers to bypass security mechanisms like multi-factor authentication. It acts as a proxy between the victim and the legitimate site, allowing the attackers to intercept the victim's credentials and MFA tokens in real time. So in other terms, Evilginx sits between the attacker and the victim, transparently capturing and relaying all the information to the legitimate website while sealing it along the way. Here's a more detailed overview of how Evilginx works in a typical attack scenario. First, the victim receives a phishing email that looks like it's from a trusted service. We'll use Microsoft in this case. The email contains a link directing the victim to a fake login page that looks identical to the legitimate one. When the victim clicks on the link and enters their login credentials, Evilginx doesn't just capture this information, but it also forwards it in real time to the legitimate source. If the service requires multi-factor authentication, the victim is prompted to enter that second factor. And again, this is usually a code sent via SMS or generated by an app like Microsoft Authenticator. Evilginx is able to capture this code as well as forward it to the legitimate site. The attacker now has both the victim's login credentials and the MFA token, which means they can successfully log into the victim's account, bypassing the security which was initially provided through MFA. The attackers can now use the victim's account as if they were the victim, and since the victim was forwarded to their intended destination, it prevents them from realizing that they entered their credentials into a malicious site. So how is Evilginx configured? Before I get into that, I want to state that this is only for educational purposes, and you should not be using Evilginx on assets that you do not own or are not authorized access to. Setting up Evilginx is actually not super complicated, and just recently Evilginx Pro was released for purchase, and this is specifically for red teamers and security professionals, which makes things a lot easier. To start off, you will need a host to act as the attack system. Evilginx is supported on both the Linux as well as Windows operating systems. You will also need to register a domain which will be used to host the phishing site itself. On the attack host, you want to make sure that you have the Go programming language installed, since that's what the actual tool is written in. You will, of course, need to install Evilginx, which can be cloned directly through the Kubernetes GitHub repository, who's actually the developer of the phishing framework itself. Next, you will need to decide on a phishing template, which are called fishlets within Evilginx. Fishlets are written in YAML format, and you can create your own custom templates or download various ones online. There's also a lot of documentation directly on the Evilginx website as well as reference. Within each of these templates, there are, of course, subdomains and URLs that also need to be configured on your DNS site to ensure proper communication and the enablement of TLS. There's some additional configuration related to the assignment of the phishing domain as well as the attacker's host IP address. But once all of that is done and you have enabled the fishlet, you can create a lure, which is essentially the malicious destination, and send the link to the intended target. So fairly simple. Perfect. So now let's do a technical demo of Evilginx to see how it works from both the victim's and the attacker's perspective. I have, of course, already gone through the setup of the infrastructure, and we will just be seeing how that token is actually stolen and used for authentication by the attacker. So let me go ahead and share my screen here. Perfect. So on the left-hand side of the screen here, we have our victim, and on the right-hand side, we have a Kali Linux machine that is hosted in Microsoft Azure, which I have SSH into, and it is acting as our attacker system in this case. In the scenario that we have created here today, we have John, who works for HR at Bright Vista Corp. He has received an email in his inbox from Andy, who works in the security team, asking for a review of an onboarding document. John works very closely with Andy in related projects, so this was not out of the ordinary. He also followed the best email security practices by checking the sending email address to confirm that this email is from a legitimate sender. However, John did not notice that there was a T missing in the word Vista within the brightvistacorp.com domain. So John went ahead and clicked on the embedded SharePoint link, which on the Evilginx side, we can immediately see that there's a new visitor coming. So it's establishing that connection. And John continued to enter in his credentials. So we'll put in his email address here, as well as the password. And immediately as we hit enter, we can see the username as well as the password immediately being captured through Evilginx. I am then prompted by an MFA prompt, which I will go ahead and enter that in. And as soon as we're signed in, we can also see that the token is also captured by Evilginx. And from John's perspective, he just visited the MS365 website as if nothing happened, right? So at this point, the attacker has everything needed to impersonate the user and proceed with stealing the active session. In this case, what I'll do is I'll open up an incognito session to simulate a browser which we have not authenticated into previously. And I'll go back to office.com. So now we're acting as the attacker. And on the Evilginx side, what I'll do is I'll bring up the sessions that have been captured. And we can see the recent one that was just captured, which is the one that we're looking for. So this is session ID 48. And what we're presented with is the cookie session here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this entire block of text here and then use a simple cookie modifier downloaded from the browser as an extension to essentially replace the existing cookie session. So I'm going to enter in that entire string of text there and hit import. And if we go back to the browser and hit refresh, we should see that we're authenticated in as John Smith. So from here, the attacker can proceed with conducting data exfiltration, creating forwarding rules, use the compromised account for further social engineering attacks in order to expand their footprint. So as you can see, this tool is super easy to use and it can be a very effective form of attack. So perfect. Let me go ahead and perfect. We can skip the video slide. That went smooth. Perfect. So now that we learned about how Evilginx works, let's discuss some ways that we can protect against it. Let's begin with certificate-based authentication, which is arguably one of the best methods for verifying the identity of a user or a device. Certificate-based authentication leverages digital certificates. These are cryptographic credentials issued by a certificate authority. This replaces traditional passwords with a more secure method of authentication, essentially. You can think of digital certificates as like an electronic ID card that proves who you are, but instead of a physical card, it is stored on your device and it is used to authenticate your identity online. It uses public key cryptography, also known as asymmetric encryption. Each certificate has a public key, which is shared with the server, and a private key that is kept securely on the device. When you attempt to log in, the server verifies your identity using the public key to match the encrypted request signed by your private key. We then have trusted locations, which can add another layer of security based on where the user is logging in from. A trusted location is essentially a geographic or network-based parameter that defines where users are considered safe to log in from. These locations might be based on known IP ranges, specific countries, or even organizational building networks. Access to a service or a resource from a trusted location is seamless and may require no additional security steps. However, if the login request is coming from an untrusted or a suspicious location, additional authentication measures can be triggered. Finally, let's discuss phishing-resistant MFA, which helps protect against token hijacking by design. We covered that traditional MFA typically requires something you know and something you have. Phishing-resistant MFA goes a step further since the authentication process involves cryptographic processes. This prevents attackers from being able to intercept or replicate the login attempt, even if they've stolen the user's credentials. As an example, phishing-resistant MFA uses cryptographic tokens, such as hardware keys. You may be familiar with YubiKeys specifically, or app-based authentication that doesn't rely on shared secrets like one-time passwords. Since many organizations use MS365 for their identity access management and email needs, I did also want to cover some of the specific features provided by MS365 that organizations can take advantage of in protecting against Evilginx. These features generally require one or more of the licensing mentioned here on the screen, depending on your environment and the level of controls that you are looking to implement. One of the best ways to protect against malicious authentication within MS365 is by utilizing conditional access policies. These policies are based on if and then statements that determine whether a user can access a resource based on certain conditions. In my opinion, one of the most useful configurations that can be implemented is to restrict authentication to compliant devices only. This means that you are only going to allow access to devices that meet your corporate standards. And these are devices that are enrolled within Intune or have other specific configurations that you have set as a compliance policy. Organizations that run hybrid environments within Entra and traditional Active Directory can also be utilized through the Entra Hybrid Join Devices policy, which provides similar protection to the compliance policy that we described. But at this point, it's based on the trust relationship of that hybrid environment. Additionally, you can set device filtering conditions on the trust type properties, which will again limit access to devices that are Entra ID joined or registered. In all of these cases, if a user account token is stolen, they will not be able to access the account remotely since the attacker will not have access to a compliant device. Microsoft also uses something called continuous access evaluation by default to regularly monitor active sessions and identify ones that appear potentially malicious. This can be further enhanced by implementing trusted locations like we described earlier. Of course, with all of these different configurations, it's important to take into account your own business requirements and understand the various risk treatment options. All right, that concludes my presentation. I hope that it has been informative, and I think we can take some questions now. Back to you, David.
Devon, that was terrific. I think it's always exciting for people to see like how some of these attacks work in reality and how simple they can be. So we've got a couple questions that come in during the presentation. And anybody else, if you have any questions, please feel free to add anything using the QA feature or just posting in the chat. We do have one question from Isaac. He says, hello. I had a security problem with my Gmail account 2 weeks ago. which is protected with double authentication password plus auth code. Um, can you comment on that, Savan, on how that applies to this scenario?
Yeah, so I mean, it's going to be a very similar attack, right? As far as I know, Authy uses one-time passwords as well, right? Which again goes back to that session authentication and the cookie sessions that we're talking about. So Evilginx should still be able to bypass that, right? What we're looking for is device-based authentication or any sort of restriction that limits you within a specific region, right? So it's the location that really comes into play. So if the question is, can Evilginx essentially compromise that? I would say most likely.
Awesome. Thanks, Savan. Another question. Can Evilginx be used to target any website, or is it specific to certain platforms like Microsoft or Google?
Yeah, absolutely. So Evilginx works for any service that uses cookie-based authentication, which includes many popular websites and platforms. Again, the key requirement is that targets a website or a service must rely on session cookies, and most websites do. But as you guys saw, we're also able to just simply capture the username and the password off the go, right? So even if it doesn't use that and there is no MFA, this tool can be used as a traditional attack as well. Uh, the only benefit of this is that it's able to bypass the MFA side of things as well.
Okay. All right. Ace asks, when doing investigations on business email compromise attacks, is there any way to do a deeper dive to find out where and who initiated the attack? A paper trail we can follow.
So it goes back to your SIM and the various logging methods that you have. The problem with that is that IP addresses a lot of the times can be spoofed fairly easily with VPNs and proxy addresses, right? So it can be tricky, but you are able to actually identify the initial point of compromise where things actually started happening, and kind of trace the steps and take mitigation efforts and containment efforts. But yeah, IP addresses unfortunately are very easy to spoof these days, so it's very hard to know exactly where the traffic is coming from.
So follow up. So usually the only thing we can do is kill the sessions and change the password. But as a proactive measure, how can we reduce our attack service with business email compromise attacks?
Yeah, absolutely. So the containment part is that, and you also want to make sure that you're invalidating all existing session tokens, right? Because again, if you just change the password and there's a valid token, that may not stop the session itself. So you want to go back and invalidate those tokens. In terms of reducing it, it's essentially the methods that we kind of described on and touched on, right? It's a lot of preventative measures in terms of using those conditional access policies if you're on the Microsoft world, right, and you're using that licensing feature, using certificate-based authentication, right, on the devices. You really want to just bring in the device as another layer of protection here. The whole point of this is that if your device can also authenticate on top of your traditional identity access management, your user, that's when it can be stopped and prevent others from accessing. Now, it doesn't mean they can't capture this information. It just means that they can't authenticate because they'll need that compliant device as well. So there are different preventative measures that we do, and it will go back to your user training as well, right? That's a big part of an email security program in general. I feel like many organizations, the leaders are under the impression that everyone understands phishing and general security best practices within their organization, and they don't invest enough into resources on educating them. But that's generally not the case. So going back and giving those training, I think, will be very valuable in preventing it.
Awesome. Cohen asks, hi, Sivan. Thank you for your explanation. What are your thoughts on passkeys in phishing resistance?
I think they are definitely they follow the FIDO2 compliant devices again, which goes back to that phishing resistant MFA. You're using the private keys essentially for authentication, and by design, these are going to prevent those sessions from being stolen. Since if they do steal it, it's just going to be an encrypted text which they cannot use to access the resource. So I think that'll be great. If you have anything else to add on that, David.
No, I don't actually.
Okay.
Okay, so what are some of the most common misconceptions about email security that organizations need to be aware of?
Well, I would say the biggest one is the fact that most people believe that MFA is a foolproof solution, which, as we just saw, it's not. So that's a big one there. Another one is that many organizations believe that secure email gateways, if they have a secure email gateway, that means they're safe and they're not going to get phished. And unfortunately, technical controls work until they don't. So the concept of defense in depth is very crucial in this scenario. We really want to be able to create multiple layers of protection so that if one control fails, there are backups available. And again, the same thing that I mentioned about phishing and general training for end users. I think that's a big misconception that many leaders have, and they don't invest enough resources in making sure that everyone on the team is on the same page. My general philosophy in security is that assume nothing about your knowledge or other people's knowledge, and always try to learn and educate since it's such an evolving industry.
And Isaac asks, what are the best practices to use while building authentication systems?
That can be a lot of things. It really just depends on the authentications, the goals of the authentication that you're trying to achieve. Uh, Generally speaking, having Microsoft environment using Entra ID as your identity access management solution is a great start, or Active Directory, followed by having the MFA controls that we're talking about. I know Windows Hello is actually becoming more and more popular these days in the Microsoft world, which there's like a specific Evilginx template just for Windows Hello as well. Uh, so it really comes down to business requirement. Authentication is not something that's generic in most cases, but having a good identity access management and strong MFA solution is a great start. But it really just depends on the business requirements.
Or you touched on it a little bit with some of the response to session tokens, et cetera, but what steps should organizations take if they discover that an employee has fallen victim to an Evilginx attack?
Sure. So the response shouldn't be very different than if it was a traditional phishing attack, right? The first thing you would want to do is, of course, contain the situation. So that would be resetting user passwords, again, invalidating those session tokens. That's a big one. It would be a good idea to check forwarding rules and ensure there are no backdoors placed on the account itself. Attackers sometimes set recovery information and add additional MFA devices to allow them to regain access in the future. You also want to check authentication logs and try to identify when the account was potentially compromised. Not necessarily who it was, because that's a rabbit hole. Uh, check mail flow logs essentially to see if malicious email was sent out to everyone else or used to exfiltrate data from the mailbox. If the attacker used it, a lot of times what they do is they compromise an account and then they send out a mass email to the victim's contact information in order to gain more of a footprint and be able to gain access to multiple accounts. So what you can do is reach out to your contacts again and give them a heads up that this is something that's happened. But again, at the end of the day, follow your organization's incident response policy and any other procedures that they may have, so that you don't get into trouble. But that would be a high level summary of it.
Awesome. Thanks, Ivan. Oh, here's another one. So for the MFA and authenticator code, if the victim enters their code, there's usually good for 1 minute. What code expiration would that code expire at some point? Just trying to understand that. It's from Dan.
So I think the code you're referring to there is the TOTP code, the time-based one-time password code on the app itself. Uh, this is a different session cookie that we're capturing here, right? So it's not the same as the TOTP code that you're entering onto the platform. These session cookies can be set to expire in a short period of time or a long period of time, right? So if you've been on a browser, for example, and you've logged into an account and you come back 2 days later and you're still logged in, that's the essential session cookie that we're referring to, and Evilginx is able to capture that. So if that expires within 10 minutes, for example, and you can set that as a policy within MS365. Yeah, perfect.
Cool. Anybody else? Okay, well, I'd like to thank everyone for joining us today for today's Cyber Resilience 202, and a big thank you to Sivan again for today's session. I'd like to invite you all to our upcoming webinar on March 25th. In this webinar, we're going to review the findings of our 2024 mid-year cyber risk report and exploit how the previously discussed trends have evolved since the report's release. You'll hear from our claims team as they review the top cyber attacks of 2024, how the claims landscape has shifted, and actionable strategies for organizations to safeguard against emerging threats. Registration link has been dropped into the chat. We'll also include it in our follow-up email from today's session. Thanks again for joining us, and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.